the CEO of the Commodore, I want to see if I can say this first time, Commodore Conyers College and Career Academy.
You got it.
4C Academy CEO, Chris Hatcher. Thank you for being here today.
Excited to be here. Appreciate the opportunity to talk about our school and our kids.
Absolutely. Before we get into 4C Academy and some of these things, because I have a little bit of a story myself, let's talk about Chris Hatcher, man. Let's give the viewers some perspective of kind of where you came from and how you got to where you're at right now.
Yeah, so I'm from Albany. I grew up here, graduated from Westover High School, went to the University
Patriot.
Yeah, that's right,
All
Patriot.
right.
Went to the University of Georgia, so I'm also a Bulldog.
Even better.
And from there, was really trying to figure out a way to see some of the world after college before I got into my career.
Mm-hmm.
So I started exploring a couple of opportunities and really kind of focused on the Peace Corps as an opportunity to get and learn a little bit about a new culture, a different culture. And so
where were you located?
Well, interestingly, I didn't really care where I was going to go. And so, which I found out later in the long application process for the Peace Corps, it's not something you just sign up for, which I thought it was. But one little question on the application is, where would you like to be located? And I sort of checked, does it matter? And apparently that's one that they're looking for because they want folks that aren't going on a vacation. And so anyway, the other piece that I learned I had to do to get into the Peace Corps was have some sort of skill. I was a history major at Georgia. And so I learned that beekeeping in third world countries was a coveted skill because these third world countries they need every opportunity to make any bit of income. And so I took a course my senior year at the University of Georgia called The Hive and the Honeybee. It was taught through a renowned international entomology specialist from Germany on beekeeping. And so I probably know more about bees than anything else, which isn't saying a lot. But, so I got that and then learned that I was going to Tunisia, Northern Africa. So that's where I was stationed.
Well, let's go back to school. Were you a good student growing up? Like, were you good
I was
grades?
probably A minus, B plus student. Not a great student, not a studious student. I enjoyed reading. I enjoyed doing things. But I didn't really enjoy studying. And then that's sort of, as a history major, I like to read. I like to learn about things. And so that's what sort of drew me to that major.
Man, I would have paid for those grades. Whatever money I had, which was hardly any, I would have paid for those grades. So let's go back to the Peace Corps.
Yeah.
I mean, what drew you to want to do that, to want to be involved in that?
Well, I think a lot of folks that are drawn to the Peace Corps, there's more of a altruistic type thing, and certainly that was part of it. But really, I wanted to learn about a new culture and a different culture. I wanted to do something before I entered my career. And living in northern Africa in a Muslim community, it was about as far away from South Georgia as you can get. So I got what I was looking for sure, and just enjoyed every minute of it.
So when I first met you, you were an entrepreneur. You had a lot of different things going on, and I was able to work on a project with you that was really cool. I'd like to talk about that a little bit. I think there's some interesting things we can learn from that situation. But you were you worked in the hospital for a while.
That's right. So after I got back from the Peace Corps, I went into graduate school and got a master's in business administration and health administration, and a strong interest in healthcare. And so with that degree, I came back home to Albany and worked at Phoebe Putney Health Systems, and enjoyed every minute of that, really. It was a great opportunity for me to learn about an industry that's like no other, and really just got a lot of opportunity there from the leadership, and just enjoyed every minute of it, really. It was a great experience.
Were you in a leadership type role there?
I was. I started our physician hospital organization, which is a PHO, and it was a startup, which I enjoy. And so really my job was it was the hospital partnering with physicians to then contract for managed care, to really provide plans to employers and insurance companies. And so, we had to put a lot of pieces together, had to work closely with the physician community. And so that organization is still running today that I started, and so it was a very rewarding part of my career.
What from the Peace Corps did you bring in that you learned in the Peace Corps? Did you bring into that?
I think, I don't know specific to healthcare, but just really the Peace Corps taught me how to solve problems.
Really?
Which I think is the number one skill that anybody can have, regardless of where they are, what their job is, what they're doing, whether it's school or career. And because you really had to be acute in your senses. I did not have a lot of language. The native language I had to learn. I had to really be attentive to what they were saying, and we picked up on the language pretty quickly, but you had to really figure out things and how to do things a little differently, how to solve problems, and that was a big part of my career in healthcare, and it's a big part of what I do right now.
By the way, I was terrible at school. For the longest time, and I've mentioned this before, for the longest time when I was in school, probably about fifth grade and beyond, for the longest time I thought, man, maybe I'm not intelligent. What's wrong with me? Because some of my friends, man, they would just whim through school and they'd sleep in class and they would ace their tests. Some of them would work a little bit harder. They would do really well. I just did not do good in school. And for the longest time, I thought something was wrong with me. I thought, man, if I can't get through this, and of course the media during that time, it's like, if you don't have an education, you're worthless.
Right.
You're not going to do anything. My parents never made me feel that way. But man, it was daunting for me all the way through high school. I mean, I struggled so hard. Do you think that the education system is set up for every type person?
I don't. I think, it's all about engagement. And that's what I've found here in my brief 2+ years in education. This group, and I'll talk about it now or later, but this generation, I've done a fair amount of research on this generation, and they're different, but they're the same.
Fascinating.
They
man.
are. But what you were challenged with, just like I was, you weren't engaged in high school. Nothing grabbed you. You maybe didn't see the relevance of what you were doing, because had there been something, let's say, media-oriented, you would have been all over it, or something that tapped into your creative side, that would have grabbed you more than sort of the mundane, lecture, 50-minute lecture. That did not grab John Tomlinson. It doesn't grab most people these days. And so, that's one of the things that we try to do at the 4C Academy, is find ways to engage this generation.
Yeah, because certainly at some point, the education system is going to have to change, because I know that there's some resilience as far as people kind of admitting that you can find out anything you want right here,
right.
Click of a button. And I know there's some bad information out there on the internet, but there's also a lot of really good information. But what do you think the education system is going to need to kind of realize and do over the next 10 years to really, stay as valuable to the marketplace?
Well, I think what we've got to do is find ways to engage kids, and what we have done is really focus heavily on project-based learning, on doing something, because here's a few things that we know about this generation. First of all, their attention span, this is Generation Z, 22 and below, their attention span is 8 seconds. Okay, the millennial crowd was 12 seconds, so it's 4 seconds less than the folks that everybody's been struggling with in the workforce. This crowd, their attention span is 8 seconds. They're incredibly impatient. They're used to everything being on demand, Netflix, Spotify, their music, their Amazon, their products, whatever they want it now. I remember as a kid, I couldn't wait till Sunday night to watch the next episode of Disney. I mean, that was kind of the thing. This generation will wait for the entire season to be released so they can watch the whole season in one weekend. Very impatient. So that's another thing. They're attention span, impatient. A 50-minute lecture to this generation is torture. I mean, that's just, part of the research. And so, how do you find ways to capture that group? And we do that through project-based learning. And we've got something that we're trying this year. It's brand new for us. And, we're learning a lot. We do a lot of innovative stuff, and some of it works and some of it doesn't. I think this will end up working. And I'll just tell you a little bit about that. What we have done to try and, combat this generational divide in the way they learn is we have school Monday through Thursday at 4C. On Fridays, we are completely dedicated to project-based learning. Okay, we've got something we call Group Up, and there's no school on Fridays. There's no math, there's no science, there's no pathway. What they do is every student belongs to one of 10 community projects. And once they got assigned to those projects, they've got to identify their problem statement, and they got to figure out how to solve it. And so we're doing things like this, robotics in the real world. So we've got a team that identified how they can build a robot to pick up trash in parking lots after events. And so it's an autonomous robot, like a one of those Roombas for the parking lot. So they're building that right now. We've got a healthcare team focused on healthy eating and healthy lifestyles, and they're simply trying to tell our young students that they need to reduce their sugar, they need to increase their water intake, and they need to get some exercise. Okay, so that's their problem. We've got a construction team that is partnered with Cheehaw, and they're rebuilding some of the habitat that was damaged in the storms. We've got all of our ninth graders belong to an ag team, okay? And they are, first of all, learning about our state's #1 industry. They're learning how to grow fresh food, and they're also learning how to give back to our community because we have 40 raised bed gardens that our students built. They put the irrigation in. They're growing collards.
So they're getting their hands dirty.
They're getting their hands dirty.
That's incredible.
And now we're building a mobile produce stand. So we'll take all the food that we're growing and we'll take it in our neighborhoods, which we're, by the way, located in the middle of a food desert. There's no grocery store within 6 miles of our school, and then we'll give that back to the community. And so that's what's going on Fridays in an effort to try and get to how these kids learn. And, again, the jury's still out. I think it's way more positive than negative. There's light on structure, which gives some of our teachers some pause. It gives some of our students some pause. But we gotta try something. So to your point,
I would have killed to have an opportunity to be involved in something like that in school.
Yeah.
I remember when I decided I was going to try this entrepreneur thing, right? Which from the outside you look at it and you're like, man, that looks really cool. You get into it and you get punched in the mouth,
right?
Like immediately. And one of the things I realized at that time, for me, not for everybody, but for me, I realized that very, very little of what I learned in the education system prepared me for anything that I was dealing with at that moment.
Right.
Negotiations, some bookkeeping, whatever. Just the things as an entrepreneur you have to deal with and that you have to learn, scale and this and that. It's almost like in the school system, I kept reading about what used to be, like things that happened in the past, and things innovate so fast. It was like, man, nothing could have prepared me for this. What are schools like this doing to prepare kids for the real, other than just the trade type stuff, but in the entrepreneurial way and business way, what are they doing to help them there?
I think a big part of what we try to do is show relevance. I mean, again, you didn't see in your education how whatever it was they were putting before you would help you with whatever was next. And so what we say at 4C is inform, engage, prepare. So this group of folks, students, a lot of times it's helpful for them to understand the why. I grew up just like you did. When your dad told you to do something, you'd ask him why. He said, because I told you so, and you did it.
Yep.
This generation is a little different. And that if you can share with them why something is important and how the relevance of whatever you're doing will help them with whatever's next for them, they're much more likely to latch on. And maybe they're not so different than we were. The approach was a little different.
Right.
So demonstrating relevance is important and showing them how the world is absolutely changing. I mean, you talk about the phone. The phone has created a lot of challenges for not only our students, but certainly for employers. And it's so distracting. The addiction is real, particularly for our young people. It's real for you and I too. I mean, we're addicted just like the rest of them. Yeah, exactly. You can't help that. The difference between myself and the students at 4C, though, is I knew a day when it wasn't there, and so I sort of already had built in some problem-solving skills and some different things of how I could cope without a phone. This group, that's how they problem solve. It is Google. period. And so getting them away from the phones and creating some skill sets that help them solve problems is something that will stay with them throughout their life and their career, and that's why it's a big focus of ours.
So, Chris, let's talk about your experience as an entrepreneur. Tell me a little bit about what you did and what you experienced through that.
Yeah, so in my, I guess, career in the healthcare world at Phoebe, I really enjoyed the startup component. I enjoyed figuring out how to get something off the ground, how to put the pieces together, how to create partnerships. And so that piece was very appealing to me personally. And so it was somewhat of a natural transition into the entrepreneurship. I saw a couple of things, in my healthcare career. And for my first venture, if you will, it was really trying to reduce the time between patient feedback loop, reduce that time. So we created a customer response system, if you will, and this was before these devices. This was back when there was the old Palm Pilot. We developed some software that sat on a Palm Pilot and allowed hospitals to survey their customers in real time, and then the information would sync and they would be able to see where they've got some opportunity for recovery and that kind of thing. And so, that was my first venture. And, I think, again, it was all about partnerships, all about, there's sales, obviously, in everything you do, and certainly in entrepreneurship there was. So we had a sales piece to that. And so great experience. We had, right on the cusp of some big success opportunities, and didn't quite hit a double, but we had a good go at it there, and then it sort of morphed in some other things that I did as well.
How crazy, and this has been true in my life. I was curious as to what you thought about this. As an entrepreneur, how crazy, especially in developing new software, new products and services and stuff like that, is it to realize how important speed is?
That's right.
It's crazy because as a creative person, and you are creative, I've found that out about you, very creative. You don't draw art on blank canvases, but you're a very creative person. I think a lot of times people they get really creative and they think. But if the speed's not there, if the speed to the market's not there, if the speed of acquisition and new opportunities isn't there, how important was speed in your ventures?
It was very important. I think in a subsequent venture that I had, I actually feel like we were ahead of our time a bit. But speed was certainly important, and it's important for a couple of reasons. One, you want to get out there and get some revenue and momentum. You've got lots of pressure, particularly when you have investors, and so you have to use your resources wisely, and you have to the quicker you can start demonstrating some revenue, the better success that you can have to try to grow. And so but this latest venture we had, I think it's actually today's world is more suited than it was 10 years ago. It was a venture called Family Time. And essentially, Family Time was a private network where families could collect information and record like an online scrapbook over the course of their lifetime, where you could put different pets that you have, different places that you lived, different sports that your kids were involved in, where they went to school. And so the idea was, over the course of your lifetime, you could go back and reflect and show your kids quickly through a digital format. And so, interestingly, right now, with all the challenges around privacy and around different things and Facebook stalkers and all that kind of stuff, it's probably would have been better suited to start that now than then. But we ran hard and fast, and and morphed like you have to do. That as an entrepreneur, you're going hard one way, and then you find out that for whatever reason there's a barrier there. You've got to kind of pivot, and we did that 3 or 4 times, and certainly I think our being located in Southwest Georgia didn't help our cause. We were a technology company, but again, lots of things learned along the way, lots of problems solved, lots of great people we met, and no regrets. The 4C Academy is 2.5 years old, so I was sort of the startup CEO for it. So it's a new venture and a new school here in Albany, relatively new. I was very involved in economic development for the last 10 or 15 years here in Albany. I serve on the Economic Development Commission. We as a community recognize the importance of workforce and talent development. Mm-hmm. So that's when we went on this journey to try and secure a grant for a college and career academy. I was appointed by the EDC to represent them on the initial board of the academy, and
didn't know that.
And really went to the first meeting and heard a little bit about it and said, look, I really want to be involved in this. I don't want to just be a board member. And so I parked my current venture at the time with a partner, and here we are. And so I was a startup CEO, which I enjoy. Mm-hmm. Spent a lot of time with our business and industry, understanding what their needs are, what types of talent they were looking for, what types of skills they were looking for, and we built the whole academy based on market research from our business community. And so it has it has been exciting each and every year. So this is like I said, we're in the middle of our third year.
What is Chris Hatcher? What is your hope for this generation that's coming up? What is your hope for them in the next 10, 15 years?
Again, I think there's just a lot of opportunity. I mean, this economy, certainly, economies like they always do, they'll wax and wane a little bit, but the information age does open so many opportunities for young folks. I think it's real important, though, that they secure foundational skills that will allow them to find success in whatever they do. And again, those are skills that I say are things like collaboration, learn how to work with others. Again, technology is working against you with these skills because you live in this mobile device world where you're not required to collaborate to be successful. But guess what? You're going to need to collaborate and work with others in whatever you choose to do. Problem solving skills. Don't simply learn how to figure stuff out as opposed to just Google, mm-hmm. Critical thinking. I think it's real important for young people to know, to be curious and to really solve problems. I think that is what my hope is for the folks that come through our school, because that's what's going to lead to their success, whether they go directly into the workforce, go to 2-year college, go to 4-year college. The employers of today are looking for people with those types of skills, and so that's. But I think that the future is bright. I really do. It's a good time to be young, and I'm excited for the kids that come through our school, just like I am for my own.
Well, Chris, man, it's been awesome. I appreciate you being here.
Absolutely.
TMG Talks. We'll see you next time.